Hello and welcome back to Macabre and Company. Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Erica. Last name and birthday unknown.
I am a mystery. I am an enigma with no date of birth.
And that is why
Um,
you're perfect for this podcast because we love a mystery. We love an enigma.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And today we're doing something a little bit different. We're not telling a story that we've researched. We are doing a much requested Ask Me Anything storytelling from our days on cruise ships. Now, we are not going to say what cruise line we worked for. We're not going to say what cruise ships
Ship
this occurred on
names.
because we don't want to get sued by anybody. No ship names.
So I
So, no
actually,
ship names.
yeah, no ship names and no cruise lines, but I did look up
Yeah.
the legalities in that. And
Oh,
here
okay.
in the United States, though, but the thing is, this is around the world, and some people are registered in other places, but in the US, if you're a public company like, big name cruise lines,
They are.
then you are, you're allowed to talk about them because they're in like not the public domain, but it's like public, so you're allowed to.
Yeah.
However, because some of these stories we're going to tell are involving real people, we won't do that. It's the real people we're worried
Yeah.
about. Forget the cruise
Yeah,
line.
exactly. We're not worried. Yeah, we're not worried about the cruise line. We don't want anyone to see themselves in these stories or hear about themselves. There's no need for that.
So, some of the response that I've had from us talking about this previously and potentially doing an
Mhm.
episode like this is from people that we have worked with, or even people that follow along with
Really?
us that aren't that were never crew members, people that have maybe sailed, but just people that we've met through cruise lines.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think let's start like do the Cliff's Note version of just like the role that you had on ships and how long you worked on ships, and I'll do the same. You go first.
So, I worked on ships for 10 years. Or very, very close to that. And I had different jobs in entertainment. So I started as what back then was called a social host. A social host, there was three of us that would work alongside the cruise director and the cruise staff assistant. We're a very small group of, and we used to like have fun, right, with the guests.
Yeah.
Then I was promoted to assistant cruise director, which at the time the job had been around, but not like major at that point. It was a fairly new role at that time to kind of come in. So then I did that quite young actually. I started when I was 18, and then I worked my way up to being a cruise director. If you're listening, we're laughing because I keep making mistakes and I keep saying cruise lines and cruise ship names. Um, which we said we weren't going to do. So I finished as a cruise director. In between that, I mean, we did a whole bunch of different things, right? I mean, we were DJs, we were embarkation staff, we were debarkation staff, we were guests, we did all sorts of stuff in that department.
Yeah. Entertainment is often used for a lot of different things because they're the group of people that are the most talkative, the most and interactive with the guests, and are really accustomed to kind of a little bit of crowd control. So we'll
Right.
often work for the water shuttle operation or work for
Yeah.
and making sure people stay in line and like waving goodbye when you leave the ship, like a
Yeah.
lot of that.
But tell us about
I
your journey because you had a
Yeah,
pretty crazy
I
one.
was all over the place.
Yeah.
I was also I was one contract away from 10 years. And I started as guest services because that's where my education and my experience was. I had worked for hotels, I had worked in restaurants, I was
Mhm.
hospitality and like food and beverage trained. So I started in guest services, and I did two contracts in guest services, one of which was in Europe, and we did like 55 countries. We did the Baltic, we did the Mediterranean. We had like 3 months going at a Venice and England as a home port and going around there. And then England was the second half, and we did like the Norwegian Isles and went to
That's so
Russia and
cool.
it was so cool. Like Dover, England is such a fun home port. And we had Venice, Italy as a home port. Like really, really incredible. Um, And then I had seen the entertainment staff. I was like, that looks like the most fun. I didn't realize that was a job that you could do.
Yeah.
So after two contracts in guest services, once you're in, it's easier to move around. And I um was on my second contract was like, I think I can do this. So I kind of like when I wasn't working, I would go and I would be on there were used to be TV shows on the ship. So, the cruise director and the team would be on these TV shows in the morning or the afternoon. And that would go to all the TVs in on the ship. So I would like volunteer my time and go do like top 10 funniest questions guest services gets asked and like guest star on these shows with them, and like learn how to do trivias and just kind of like spent any extra time I had getting to know the cruise staff. And with doing that, then they were like, yeah, absolutely, you'll be great, transfer me over to entertainment. And I did several contracts as entertainment. I was a comedy club host. I was a bingo host. I was the bingo queen. I had a crown made of bingo balls and a
Bingo Queen.
wand, and
You
it
were
was
the
right around.
excuse me, you were the comedy club manager, baby.
I was the comedy club manager when we worked together. Yes, and
Yeah.
as a cruise staff, you would rotate around different
Yeah.
responsibilities, and the bingo manager was kind of in charge of like making sure the inventory was all there, and you ran the games and you did all the counting and stuff. And then comedy club host manager person did all the introductions for the comedians, and we're kind of in charge of the venue, making sure that like it didn't get too rowdy and you might have to call security, and it was a whole thing. um and then there was a new role they put in that was in charge of the media on board, so in charge of making the documents that are put in the guest cabins every day, the ones there's like a rundown of all of the events. And I always loved doing that, and it used to lie with a cruise director.
Oh
So
yeah.
you used to hate doing that document
All
every
that
day, and I
stuff.
used to you taught me how to do it, and so I would do it for you. And when that role came up, I was like, I already know how to do this.
Yeah.
So I applied for that job, and I got to be in charge of all of the shipboard media. And that included like programming the TV, the big screen TV that's on the Lido deck that shows movies. So I did all of that programming and all
All
of
the
the
information
document,
screens, right? Like all the touch
all the
screens and
information
stuff.
screens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to have to like that was part of my job, was like going around and being like, does this screen look right? And
Yeah.
that was really fun. And then they changed the structure of the entertainment department, and the cruise director was always the head of the entertainment department. But then they put in the entertainment director, who was more of an admin role. So the entertainment director was in charge of everybody. It worked really alongside the cruise director, but just took all of that admin off of the cruise director's plate. So the cruise director could be the face and the voice of the ship. And the entertainment director did the scheduling and the disciplinary stuff and went to all the captain's meetings for safety and was in charge of all of that busy work, so that like could really free
So
the
the cruise
cruise
director
director
could
up
be with
to,
the guests. Yeah.
yeah, be with the guests,
And
be on
do
the
the
floor,
fun
be,
stuff.
yeah, do the trivias, do the games, do the parties. And so then I applied for the entertainment director and I got that. So I spent the last 5 years, almost 6 years, as an entertainment director, and I absolutely loved it. And the
Actually,
only
you
reason I
left. Didn't you fly was it, didn't you fly from my wedding to Miami to meet about the entertainment director? Wasn't that
I
around the
think I
same
did.
time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I did.
It was like the day after or a couple of days after. I'm pretty sure you were like, I'm going down there to meet with them for the entertainment gig. And I was like, well, Ryan and Butch are going to be at my wedding.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true. Um, yes. Yeah, I did. I went right
Yeah.
there. And you left a few years before me, but you also
Yeah.
started a few years before me. And then
Hmm.
I stayed right up until COVID. And that's the only reason I stopped, was COVID stopped everything. And
Yeah.
by the time this ship started again, I had built a life on land and was living in Australia and just didn't go back.
With the kangaroos.
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so that's what we did. But I think as well, a kind of footnote about being a just a crew member, a team member on a cruise ship in general, is you hear the stories. Imagine living in small town, small village. It's very like that. You know everybody's business because you're
Yeah.
eating every meal with these people. You're entertaining and going out like with your friends with these people. These are your friends. These are you live next door to them. Some people live
Yeah.
with their teammates, right? So it's in the same room. So you become like really invested in each other's lives, but also stories and
Mm.
like myth and legend travels around the cruise ships like nobody's business.
Yes. And that leads us to a question from our social medias. Are there any ghosts on the ships? And I think you have experience with a ghost on a ship.
There's actually a couple of ships that I've been on that were believed to have had ghosts. I mean, you hear stories, people would say like, don't go below deck two because it's haunted down there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I think a lot of the ports were said to be. I will say that the port of Nassau, there was a lady that used to be our like port agent in Nassau. I believe her name was Trisha. She used to come on and the port there was haunted. She used to tell us a lot of stories about that, like at night after the ships leave, how eerie it is, and people like can hear
Yeah.
like things because like people when they were building the port itself, they like died during the construction of it. Now, on
Mm-hmm.
ships, like we all know that unfortunately, cruise ships do have death to deal with death a
Yeah,
lot more than
they
people actually
do.
think about it, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
cruise ship has a morgue because a
Yeah.
lot of times people die of natural causes. And when you have a giant floating city that has, I mean, now can hold up to like 6,000 people, like guests.
Yeah, and like 6,000 guests and 1,200, 1,500 crew.
Yeah,
It's a
you
lot.
think of all those people, like something's going to happen. You always hear stories about people going overboard. Okay, I'll talk about one ship that we actually called the Death Star. Eventually, that was its nickname in the fleet. I can use that, right? I
Yeah.
can say that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because the ship had had a lot of bad luck over the years as far as from like it's when it was built, you know, lots of problems from
Yeah.
there, lots of engine problems, stuff going down. And once you're a guest, you don't realize that these things, but cruise ships are like giant cars, right? Vehicles. So
Yeah.
cars break down, like things
Yeah.
happen. It's also like a hotel. You go to an old hotel and you see a leak in the ceiling or you see wallpaper coming off. Happens in
Yeah.
cruise ships. They're old, you
Yeah.
know. A lot of them are
And you
old.
can't like we have to go to dry dock, which is like lifting the whole ship out to do any maintenance because if you think about it, you can't just turn off all the lights or turn off
Yeah,
the engine because it's got to stay afloat. It's got to do the thing. And we're constantly getting rid of guests, getting another, not getting rid of, but debarking guests and embarking guests.
yeah.
Sidebar, they call it disembarkation in Australia. Disembarking
Oh,
guests. Hmm.
of course they do.
Yeah, right. And so there's never the ship never rests.
Right.
So like there's lots of wear and tear that happens when you never turn a thing off.
So I joined one ship as cruise director after it had been rehabilitated, and they changed the name. And maritime law says you should never change the name of a ship. It's bad luck. It
It's yeah,
shocks me that
it's
people do it.
I don't know if it's a maritime law, but it's definitely
No, did I say
uh,
maritime law? I think I meant like maritime myth,
maritime lore.
lore,
Yeah.
Lore.
Yeah. I also worked on that ship after the refurb and the renaming.
Yeah.
Um,
So it was, especially at that point, people were like, there is no hope for this floating bag of bones, right?
yeah.
And it was very apparent. Everyone told stories about this ghost that was actually backstage and up in the loft, especially.
Mm,
And the story goes that during some renovation way back of the stage, this ship was built in like the early 2000s, I think, late 90s, early
yeah.
2000s, I believe.
Yeah.
And at this point, it would have probably been like mid-teens, so like 2014, 15. Anyway, I guess at some point when the stage was being built or renovated a long time ago, someone had been killed in the mechanism with
Oh no.
the stage
Yeah.
mechanisms. But it
Right.
wasn't a theater folk because we'd all be like, "Yeah, come on, haunters, join in the show."
Yeah.
This was like a ship build engineer kind of guy in the
Mm,
white overalls, you know, that just comes in
yeah.
with his tools and fixes things. And so the loft, so each ship has each theater in the ship, or back then, they all had some big kind of storage area, dressing rooms back there. And on that class of ship, when they rebuilt it, they'd actually lowered the stage down, so the stage was smaller
Mm,
than what it was,
that's right.
and where the
Yeah.
old scrims and stuff were, they'd actually turned that area into dressing rooms upstairs. So you went up the stairs to
Oh
the
yeah,
dressing
yeah,
rooms,
that's
and it was
right.
too small and then really long. It was super weird how they'd done it, but
Yeah.
um and that back there, I remember growing up there, during a show, I think it was a variety show or something, and I used to switch like jacket suits or something. And
Mhm.
anyway, I'd gone up there to change because the dance captain was up there, like, I don't know, doing laundry, doing show laundry or something. So while one of the acts was
Yeah.
on, I went up and, we probably did a shot or something, changed my
Yeah.
jacket. And I remember going up, and that particular day she wasn't there and the lights were off. So I turned them on and only half of it came on. And I swear to God, I heard someone down the other side of that dressing room. It was a long down dark hallway, and then the boys on the end.
Yeah.
There was no one in there. It was dark. I swear I heard someone say, "Hey, hey." And I was like, "Oh my God, who is that?" I just got chills all down my
Yeah.
arm. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Saz?" That was the dance captain at the time.
Yeah.
Nothing. Nothing. Turn the light on. Nothing. I walked down there. I was terrified. Anyway, when I came back, I'm like getting changed, putting my jacket on. I swear I heard something fall. I went back over there because I thought there people were messing around with me. And
Yeah.
like a bunch of the coat hangers had come off the hanging rack and were just like on the floor.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
That's haunted
I
for
mean, ships
sure.
rock and stuff, but I was like, no. And
But
people
you
had
would
told
also
stories.
notice, you would know if it had rocked, if it
Yeah.
rocked and other things would have fallen.
Yeah. And lots of different stories on haunted ships. There was another one that was really old, I think, built in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And that one for sure. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
there was
yeah.
so many stories on that. And the
Absolutely
scary
haunted.
thing about the old ones, like um before the smaller ones that we worked on, right?
Yeah.
The even smaller ones, they didn't have atriums. So even the
No.
lobbies and the hallways didn't get natural light. Like if
Yeah.
you were on the bigger ships, there was almost natural light if you were close to the atrium at least and bright,
Yeah.
but it would
They
even with
started
the
building them with
lights,
more windows.
yeah, even with the lights on those ships, I remember them just being dark and long and eerie, you
Yeah.
know?
More like cargo ships feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really the ceilings were really low on those really old ones. So maybe that kind of played with our heads, but yes. Anyway, that's my haunted cruise ship
Yeah.
ghost.
I because you talked about the morgue. Yes, there is a morgue and there is a brig, we call it, where you throw unruly people if you need to. If people need to be
Yeah.
detained, you can detain them in the brig.
Crew
I
members
was on
or
a ship.
guests.
Hmm?
It can be crew members or guests can be thrown in
Oh
there.
yes, yeah, absolutely. Throw anybody in the brig. Um, I was on a ship and we were in um oh my gosh, the Cayman Islands. We were in the Cayman Islands, and a guest. This is something. It's a really sad story, but it's really interesting because when people die, it kind of the laws that pertain to the body can often depend on where you are. So
Mm.
this person was jet skiing and fell off the jet ski, and there were other people jet skiing, and they kind of popped their head up, and somebody else hit them, and they hit their head and they drowned. So this unfortunately guest, very sad, drowned. They were from Korea, and it was like them and some friends. So they didn't have their parents there. They were like 20. They were young, and because they died in the Caymans, they kept the body and we didn't put the body on the ship. If somebody passes on the ship, you keep the body on the ship. There's a lot of paperwork. There's all the
Right.
different ports need to know that you have a body on board. They need to know how they died because if it's some kind of infectious disease, they're not going to let you dock. If
Mm.
there's really sick people on board, you're not going to be able to go to these islands. So there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be done and shown to those port agents to say we're okay. We have a body. This is what's happened. But because this person passed in the Caymans, the body went to their hospital, whenever it was, and had to stay there. And they couldn't release the body to us, the cruise ship, because we don't have any there's no legal recourse for the cruise ship over the body. So
Wow.
the other two, they're like girlfriend and friend to get back on the ship and come back to whatever home port we were in. And the crazy thing was because that person was Korean, their parents had to come get the body. They wouldn't
Oh
release it.
wow.
Yeah, and they like their poor parents didn't have passports, and had to get a phone call from the friends that this is what's happened, and it took them like months, I think, to actually get their passport and get to Grand Cayman to collect their child's body. It was really sad,
Oh my God. So you're
but
saying the port of Grand Cayman is probably haunted by a
very
headless
haunted.
Korean.
I think so. Yeah,
Wow, that's really grim. That's a
Yeah,
grim
really
one,
grim.
Are we
Yeah.
just going to talk about people dying on ships now? What's our next question? I'm sure that's
Our
a
next
question, right?
question. Yeah. That was the ghost one was a big focus. The next one was what happens when you miss the ship. And I think you probably have seen videos or on Instagram and things of people like running to try to catch the ship because they're late.
Yeah.
And often, as entertainment, as a cruise director and entertainment director, you know, you're making announcements, right? You're like,
Hmm.
so and so, are you on board? Because so we do a big account. Like, we're still there, do count all the guests, make sure everyone's on board, all the guests and crew. And there's a certain time at which the ship has to leave. And if everybody's not on board, the ship leaves without you.
Yeah.
Um, there's just too many factors. There's other ships coming in that need to dock in that spot. The ship needs to keep on its timing, and if you there's a lot of calculations done about how much fuel each ship needs to get from place to place. So if you have to go really fast to make up the time from stopping from waiting for 3 hours for this guest, it's going to affect when you refuel next and how much
Yeah.
fuel you're using. And all of the senior officers get fuel bonuses based on the fuel usage. So nobody wants to use too much fuel because they want their bonuses.
Yeah, they do.
So there's
So,
lots of factors.
yeah, I've seen it happen to guests, which I think for the
Yeah.
guests, it's rough because the guest is liable in the fine print, FYI, to
Mm.
make their own way either to the next port of call or to the home port to retrieve the ship.
Yeah.
And so it's down to the guests. For the crew, okay, you got the safety of you're protected under your visa, which means the company is liable and the company will has to fly you. I've
Yeah.
had crew members, so I had a roommate. He was a dancer from Australia,
Yeah. Oh.
and we all went out to this nightclub in the Bahamas called Bamboo in Nassau,
Oh
and
my
it was
gosh,
this
bamboo.
nightclub that was like I don't know how this tiny little white twink from England, survived.
Yeah,
So
bamboo is sketchy.
a backstory about this is we were always told as soon as you were signed on, they say you do not walk around the Nassau on your own,
Yeah.
especially at night, because we did overnight stays there. They said you were always in groups of two or more, preferably three or more, like, or going. They were just very like good about warning us, right? And the
Hmm.
reason this happened is there was an assistant cruise director who was walking back from Bamboo one night on his own and he got stabbed and they cut
Hmm.
him, remember?
Yeah.
And someone found him, some other crew members from another cruise ship found him, got the
Wow.
port
Yeah, that's
authority who
right.
came and they helped him. But anyway, this guy survived. He ended up coming back to ship, so I was like, what a brave guy.
Oh wow, I didn't know
Not
that.
for long, but for a little bit. And yeah, that was really rough. So that kind of scared everyone, but we would still do it. There was times when
Yeah.
I would walk back from that nightclub on my own. Anyway, so this one night we were all out and my roommate was at the club with other people. There was so many of the crew members there, like she's gone. Erica's iPad died. Scary cruise ship stories with George and Erica and George's sleep paralysis demon. I wonder if the Love Boat ever did a Halloween special episode. If so, we should review it. So we used to walk back from this club all the time in groups, whatever, on our own, silly. But anyway, we'd left. There was so many crew members out. The Sparkles, the casino guys are finally off, because we were in port, so they got the
Mhm.
night off. And then we had everyone, all the dancers, all the singers, like everyone. We were out in this club, and I went back with one group of people, and we got back on the ship and whatever. Probably all went to bed or went up and sat under Actually, no, we didn't. We got back to the ship. We went up and sat on the open deck because we'd all got beers and stuff in our cabins. The crew bar was closed, so we went and we sat on the front deck of the ship, just to look at the stars, whatever. There was usually a crew party on those nights up there too, so security kind of let us do what we want on those nights, and the lights were on the front of the ship when you were docked overnight. So we'd sit out there. Anyway, it was late. Back on board was 5:30, I believe, because the ship sailed at 6:30 before the sea day back to Miami. And we're sat there and I hear bing bong and they call my roommate's name. please make your way to the gangway or contact like guest services, right? Whatever they say, like
Yeah.
um, then, and at this point, I was entertainment staff. I wasn't on duty because I got off the ship, so I didn't have the phone. So no one was ringing the phone. There was no one knew where I was either. But
Yeah.
so they're calling Mick, and then my name, and we're like, what the fuck? So then my name gets called, but at this point I'm hammered, right? So I wasn't thinking, oh, maybe I should call them and be like, I'm his roommate. Let me check the cabin.
Yeah.
So I called,
Because
and
you
it was
also like, you can be breathalyzed and then fired if you're over
yeah,
blood alcohol
yeah. I mean, this is back before, this is back when that was said, but when
and
we
never
used to,
done.
and never done, right? Like this was like way back. And so they, they called my name. I called the cruise director and they said, hey, have you seen Mick? And I said, no, it's at the cabin. They said, don't, we're already there. And the cruise director was probably like, yeah, security at your cabin, stay away from that, to be honest, but, I remember going down there and they're like, come with us. We went to the gangway and they're like, it was like the staff captain was there at the gangway, the chief security, all the security guards, and then the port agents. And they're like, where were you guys? Where was the last place you were? I said, we were at Bamboo. They're like, what were you doing there? I'm like, everyone goes there. We all go there.
Yeah, what do you mean? I was at the nightclub like everybody else.
Yeah, we were there and they're like, okay, who was he with? And I said, these people. So they're like, okay. I'd said basically, I was like, the entire entertainment department was there, Germanic
Yeah.
like you do. So of course they
Mhm.
call the entire entertainment department to the main lounge.
Oh my
They
gosh.
call all the spa
No.
girls that we listed, the spa people that we listed, and all the people we were with that we remembered.
Wow.
Then so we all go, and then it got to maybe 7:30, so we were
And
sailing
no
an hour
one.
late, and they said we gotta go, and they said we gotta go. So we set sail. Now at this point, the cruise director had been giving us updates in the theater because we all just stayed sat in the theater.
Yeah.
Um, because they were
And
asking
worried
us,
because
yeah, they were
people
asking us
have gotten
questions
stand
like,
up. Like,
yeah. And so anyway, we sailed without him. The cruise director told us that they were like deploying. They got the divers, the port divers. They were looking in to make sure that he hadn't fallen in.
no.
Like, yeah, it was pretty rough. And then we had to go do a sea day. So we set
Oh,
sail. We're all in tears, no sleep.
yeah.
We've got trivia in like
Please
an hour.
God.
Bingo
Yeah.
at 10:30.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there. Anyway, the cruise director called me that afternoon and he said they found Mick. He was in a hotel. I guess what had happened was he was hammered,
Yeah.
passed out on a bench, like
Yeah.
outside the port, like where those little huts are where they sell all the
Oh,
necklaces and
yeah.
stuff. Woken up, realized the ship was gone, and walked to there was a hotel on the end there, right on the end of the pier with a little
Oh,
beach.
yeah.
Was it a Hilton? I think
I
it might
think
be
it
a
is.
Hilton.
Yeah.
He watched his Hilton and he was like super drunk, looked a mess, and told the reception like I'm a crew member, like I'm lost, I don't know where I like he was like delirious, I
Yeah.
guess. And so they put him in a room. Very nice of them. They put him in the room,
Oh,
put him on it. They were like, "Here's a room, sit there." They called the police. The police came, blah blah blah, and then they let him stay there
oh, I'm
overnight.
so glad he was at
Because
peace.
then they investigated. He said that nothing had happened. Like he didn't tell us. Anyway, the next Miami, he got on the ship, and we were all like, "You idiot! Oh my God!" But we all felt terrible because none of us had really checked in.
Yeah.
To be like, make sure someone brings Mick home, but we never did. We just didn't. We were stupid. We were
Yeah.
kids. We were drunk. Like, we
Yeah.
just went
Well,
home with who we wanted to bonk that night.
yeah.
And anyway, so he got fired.
Yeah, fair. As you do. There used to be a lot of stories because we obviously all of the lines now have the like boopy system where you scan your card as you go in, and that's how they keep track of people. But back in the day when ships started, they didn't have that, and you would just like roll call people verbally. And when you're docked in, when is it? Which place in Mexico are you? The mainland, and then there's the ferry.
Oh, Cozumel is the ship, and Playa del Carmen is the mainland.
Yeah. So people used to be docked in like Playa and then Cozumel the next day. So
Hmm.
people would get off Cozumel, take the ferry over, hang out in Playa, party all night, wait for the ship to get there and
Yeah.
get on the next day. And you would just apparently cover for your roommate, and they'd be like, "Oh, where's George?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, he's here, he's sleeping. Bye," and just fake the roll call for people because
That's
you didn't.
brilliant.
Yeah, and people would party. From a guest services side, a few things can happen when people miss the ship. So it's a nightmare for guest services, first of all. And I mean, I haven't been guest services in a long time, but I'm sure it's still a nightmare. You're looking for the people, you're calling their names, you're trying to find their friends. And then what you need to do, because usually people, and we tell everybody too, like you don't tell people to take their passports out in these countries. You say, leave your passports in your safe. You don't need them. You need your ship card and like maybe a driver's license if you need to be ID'd somewhere, but don't take your passports. So the first thing, if it looks like someone's missing the ship, you're going to their cabin. And because you can't just illegally enter someone's cabin, you've got to take security. So there'll be a guest services person. And I have been this person running where they just like have a radio and like, okay, go to, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you go and you meet security there. And you guest services unlocks the safe. Security unlocks the cabin. And like there's security making sure nobody takes anything from the cabins. You've got to unlock the safe. You've got to try to find their information. And then you give those passports to the port agent so that if the guests turn up, when they turn up, they are not like stranded in a country without their passport.
Yeah.
Because they need that to then get out. So you're finding their documents, you're getting their documents to the port agent. If they don't have their documents there, then you're at least telling the port agent, okay, they probably have them with them. And there are a few times it happened in Europe where like in somewhere like Estonia, we left someone in Estonia.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, Estonia is not a big country. There's not a lot of flights and not a lot of flights to the specific next port you might be going to. And I don't remember where. I think it was kind of in the middle of the cruise. So I think it was Estonia and then maybe somewhere in Italy. I can't even remember where we were going next, but someone got left in Estonia and there were just no flights for the next 2 ports. So they ended up having to fly back and meet us in Venice.
Oh.
I think.
So they missed most of their cruise.
They missed the back half of their cruise because they got left in Estonia and then ended up having to fly and meet us in the home port. So in that case, you leave their cabin locked and everything's fine and they come back on and they pack their things and off they go. But if someone sorry, that's not correct. You need to pack up their things. If they're going to meet in home port, they don't usually get back on the ship because everybody's embarking. If they can get back to the ship, if your cruise is long enough, your cruise is 4 days long, like for you when you're heading back to Miami, if you don't make it for the sea day, you've got to go to Miami.
Right.
If you're in the middle of a 10-day cruise, you might be able to join in the next port. If, we left people once in one of the Italian ports, but we had 4 Italian ports in a row. So they could just fly to the next from Sicily to Taormina or wherever it was. But this person met us in England and we just had to give them their luggage. So that meant that guest services had to pack all of their luggage up. But of course, again, because we need to protect us that we're not stealing their things, the guests that they're not stealing their things, a guest services person, which was myself in this case, you pack all their stuff up, but you have to create an inventory so you can match it with their things.
1 dildo, 2 condoms.
2 condoms. And no one else can help you. So like housekeeping needs to be there to let you in and watch you, and security needs to be there to make sure you're not stealing things. They just have to stand there. Well, you're like, and this person had like probably 4 suitcases. I think, who knows where they were from, but they were on a European adventure on a 12-day cruise in the Mediterranean and had like 4 different bags of costume jewelry. And I had to be like, 1 big gold hoop.
Was it a drag queen? Was it a drag queen?
I wish it was a drag queen. And it took hours. It probably took 3-4 hours to pack up this guest's belongings and have it ready for them in the port.
That's
because
crazy.
I had to also create that inventory. And then you have to like scan that and keep a copy of that inventory in case they're like, I'm missing my gaudy leopard print sling heels. You're like, you aren't, because I put them in there.
Yeah.
So the next story I wanted to tell is one that it kind of lives rent free in my mind constantly for so many reasons. So it happened on a ship in Australia, and there was a family, so mom, dad, and 2 teenage girls. Was it girls? It doesn't matter what gender the kids were, because I don't remember. The kids were like old enough to kind of know what was going on. So like probably I think like 10 and 13. And one night Dad is running around looking for mom. He can't find her anywhere. He's talking to every security guard. He is like looking frantically, trying to find. And I'm the entertainment director, so I think I was at dinner with the captain. Sometimes you have captains' dinners, and the senior officers go, and their security starting to get called. People are getting calls because this person can't find their wife, is concerned that they've jumped overboard, is like looking. So more and more people start joining the search, and security's looking, and it's a whole thing. We haven't called her over the PA system yet, but that's the next step. Because that's usually what happens if people can't find their friends. They go to guest services and say, "Can you make a bing bong?" They don't say make a bing bong. I say make a bing bong.
Yeah.
Can you make an announcement for my friend? I like to call them bing bongs. And so they've gone to guest services and been like, I can't find my wife. So now security's looking. But before you make a bing bong, you don't just bing bong for anybody. There has to be a process. So people are going to be looking before you start. That's kind of like a last resort is when you start making announcements. And oh my gosh, that reminds me of another story. And so security's looking. They find her. She is mostly naked, hooking up with some like 20-year-old other guest on the adults only deck. Like they're on a ladder here. Both of them are naked. It is the section, but it's not like that kind of adult. Like it's just no kids are allowed. So security finds them, grabs a towel, is like mortified, and is trying to like put this towel on this woman. Like, here, you have this towel. Your husband's looking for you. And she just loses it. She starts screaming. She's like running away from security. Like, I'm not going back. Like, love this guy. And this poor kid is just like, kid, he was like 20. And mom's probably like 45, 50.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So then husband, they're like, we've found her. Husband becomes aware of the situation, is like raging mad. And they have a balcony cabin, goes back to the cabin, throws all of her belongings overboard. And yeah, literally like everything, like just her entire suitcase, everything, throws it overboard, which is not allowed in maritime law. Like, that's illegal dumping. You can't just throw things.
It's brilliant.
And so then, because he threw all of her things, he's furious. He's like, you can't come back to the cabin. We're only 3 days into the cruise. But because he's thrown all of the belongings off the ship, they're like, we need to disembark you. You can't just throw a bunch of things off the ship. So they make a plan in the next port. Dad's going home. He's like, well, the kids are coming with me. Takes the kids. Mom is like, you know what? I'm going to stay. She stays. She wants to stay and hang out with this 20-year-old boy that she's hooked up with on the cruise. And she stays for the rest of the cruise.
Wow.
And husband takes the kids. Can you imagine going home after that? You go home and you're like, do you go home? Or is that
She's a brave woman.
Yeah, absolutely a brave woman. And it was wild. It was wild to just like, she's like running the deck naked with security chasing her with a towel. Like, it was a vibe.
Oh my gosh.
The other one that just came to my mind, speaking of calling people, because guest services and senior officers, you have safety duties. So if there's an emergency or if you need to muster all the guests, we're all in charge of something. So as the entertainment director, I had a certain area that I was in charge of. And if there was an emergency, I would load the guests into the lifeboat and then get on a different lifeboat at the end. So we do a lot of practice for these emergency situations, and everyone in guest services has an emergency position. So you kind of need to know where people are. And often there are phones, ship phones, so you can call people. When I was guest services, there was another guest services girl who spent a lot of nights in different people's cabins. So
good girl, like you should.
As you should. She's collecting flags from around the world. And you didn't always know where she was. And then one day there was an emergency, and there was a fire on board, and we were gathering all guest services, and we couldn't find her. Calling her cabin, her roommate's like, she's not here. All of guest services is there. We need to be in our safety positions. This could be a really serious fire. And we ended up having to page her through cabins, because the emergency channels go into the cabins. So that's when you know it's serious business, if they're paging into the cabins. If you're just paging outside the cabins, that's where the cruise director will be like, this is the show that's on tonight. You should come here. Or like, no smoking on the decks right now. But if you're paging into the cabins, you know it's serious. So they had to page into the cabins to find this girl, and she was in a cabin with an officer, and very sheepishly comes to guest services 20 minutes later. And my guest services manager after that was like, all right, when you're going home with somebody, you have to stop by guest services and put the cabin number on a piece of paper under my keyboard so that I know where you are.
Brilliant. It was like Dirty Dancing back then.
It was.
So fun.
Or like that scene in Titanic where everybody's dancing on the tables.
Yeah, but we're all too drunk to dance on the tables.
Yeah, true. Oh my god.
Back in my day, there was a time that happened, and it actually sparked this conversation a few weeks ago. And on our social media, you saw me beep it out because I, again, said the name of the ship, said the name of the company. But the story goes, and I did some research on it today and looked up the actual like CNN things and stuff. So in 2015, I believe. Damn it, I looked it up earlier. Anyway, a young lady didn't realize she was pregnant. Mm-hmm. Her parents went out to get breakfast and get ready, and they were going on an excursion in a port that the ship was docked at. And she said she wasn't feeling very well, so she wanted to stay in bed for a little bit. And her parents, they were all in the same cabin. Her parents and her sibling went to have breakfast and get their morning started, maybe do an activity or two, but they were off doing ship things in the morning. And then they went back to the cabin. She was ready to go. They said, get ready then. We'll meet you back here at X amount of time. We're going to go meet our tour. They went out on their tour. When the housekeeping went into the cabin that day, the housekeeper was cleaning, went under the bed to clean it, and there was a baby there. But the baby wasn't alive.
Yeah.
Because, and it's actually really, really sad.
It is really sad. My friend was on that ship as guest services and had to deal with that at the time. But it was a couple days that baby was there. Do not disturb sign on. They put the do not disturb sign on, and the young girl didn't leave for a bit. And after a couple days, if housekeeping notices that a do not disturb sign has been on for more than 2 days, they need to do a welfare check. So they call guest services so that you go and you're like, are you okay? What's happening? And it had been a couple days. So my friend had to go and be like, hey, what's going on? What is that smell?
Oh, yikes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the story we were talking about. There was a lot reported. This person ended up being put on trial.
Did they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what the CNN article in I think New York Times. There was a New York Times post about it. You can find it. Google it, guys. Look it up.
I only knew from my friend who was on the ship because you can call the ship, and I was on a different ship, and she called me and was like, we need to talk about my day. This is horrifying.
Yeah. But ghosts, definitely. Definitely people missing the ship and getting stuck in ports and having to spend loads of money. That in itself is very macabre, having to spend all your money on getting back to the ship.
So I think we're going to end it on that one. That was definitely a macabre story to end on. But, we both, with our collective 20 years on cruise ships, had
there's so much more to tell.
So much more to tell. There's so many good stories as well as weird stories and hilarious stories, and people do wild things when they go on holiday. And we met on ships, so I'm forever grateful. I met my husband on ships. You met your husband on ships. They're a really nice. It's some of my best friends in the whole world I met on ships.
This guy.
I wouldn't change. Yeah, this guy absolutely is haunting some ship right now. That's why we only have a picture of him. So if you liked this, if you want to hear more of this, definitely
let us know.
Socials. Yeah, you can email us at macabreandcompany@gmail.com. You can submit more questions at Macabre&Co on Instagram. Don't submit any questions on TikTok. That's not where we look for questions. But we are on TikTok at Macabre&Co. And if you want to hear some more of us, some more banter, some more off the cuff things, and also see more pictures from us in our cruise ship days. Join us on the Patreon at Macabre& Company.
And maybe one
And as
day
always,
we'll do a sister podcast called Sailors and Company.
Sailors and Company.
I
TM,
was
TM,
just
TM.
thinking though as well, one last thought. I'm gonna see if the Love Boat ever did a Halloween special episode and we'll review it.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, find that. We need
Yeah.
to do that.
Well,
Oh my gosh.
Erica, it's been a pleasure as always. I'm excited
As
to
always,
do more fun Q&A and random story episodes with you. I look forward to having all of our listeners back next week. Everyone,
yeah.
enjoy your time away from the Macabre& Company office. And as always,
Stay spooky. Bye, friends.